The evening air carried a hint of rain as Lucia wiped down her last table at the Bellevue Hotel restaurant. Her feet ached after 8 hours of rushing between tables, balancing trays of overpriced food for people who rarely looked her in the eye. Tonight was different, though. The annual charity gala was happening in the grand ballroom, which meant the restaurant was quieter than usual. Most of the regular staff had been pulled to serve at the event, but Lucia had requested to stay in her normal section. Big events meant wealthy patrons, and wealthy patrons often treated her like she was invisible. "Hey, can you cover my last 2 tables?" her co-worker Ray asked, already untying his apron. "My kid's school play starts in an hour, and I promised I wouldn't miss it this time." Lucia nodded, tucking a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Go ahead, I've got it covered." "You're a lifesaver," Ray said, grabbing his jacket. "I owe you one." As he rushed out, Lucia glanced at her watch. She should have been home an hour ago, reviewing for tomorrow's music theory exam. At 28, she was older than most of her classmates at the community college. But that didn't bother her. What bothered her was the constant juggling act, working 40 hours a week while pursuing her teaching degree, stealing moments to practice piano on the ancient upright she'd found on Craigslist. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her roommate. "Don't forget to pick up milk on your way home." Lucia sighed. Another stop before she could finally sit down. The restaurant manager, Mr. Chen, appeared suddenly at her side, his usually calm face tense with worry. "Lucia, I need a huge favor," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The gala is a disaster. The pianist they hired called in sick at the last minute, and these people—" He gestured vaguely toward the ballroom. "These people expect entertainment." Lucia froze. She knew where this was heading. Mr. Chen had heard her playing once, 6 months ago, when she thought the restaurant was empty. She'd come in early and found herself drawn to the baby grand piano that sat unused in the corner of the dining room. It was a moment of weakness. She'd been unable to resist. "I can't possibly," she began. "Please," Mr. Chen interrupted. "Just for half an hour until we figure something out. These are important people, Lucia. The mayor is here. 2 state senators, the CEO of Brightpath Tech. This could mean a huge donation boost for the children's hospital." Lucia felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She hadn't performed in front of an audience since she was 19, when a harsh instructor had told her she lacked the natural talent to ever play professionally. Those words had cut deep, reshaping her dreams from performer to teacher. "I don't even have proper clothes," she protested weakly, gesturing to her black pants and white button-up shirt, the standard waitstaff uniform stained with a splash of red wine from an earlier spill. Mr. Chen was already waving dismissively. "Nobody will care what you're wearing once you start playing. Trust me." Before she could form another excuse, Mr. Chen was guiding her toward the grand ballroom. Through the partially open doors, Lucia could see people in expensive clothes holding crystal glasses, laughing too loudly at jokes that probably weren't funny. The room sparkled with jewelry and privilege. A sudden memory flashed in her mind. Her mother's hands, cracked and worn from cleaning other people's houses, gently guiding her fingers across their neighbor's keyboard. "Music is the great equalizer," her mother would say in her soft Spanish accent. "When you play beautifully, no one cares where you come from." Her mother had scrimped and saved for years to pay for Lucia's lessons, believing her daughter had a gift that deserved nurturing. And how had Lucia repaid that sacrifice? By giving up at the first real criticism. "I'll need 5 minutes," she heard herself say. Mr. Chen looked relieved. "Take what you need. The piano is ready." In the employee restroom, Lucia splashed water on her face and stared at her reflection. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of too many late nights studying. She untied her hair, letting it fall in waves past her shoulders. There was nothing she could do about her clothes, but she did have her grandmother's pendant, a simple silver locket she kept in her pocket for good luck during exams. She fastened it around her neck. "Just get through this," she whispered to her reflection. "Play what you know. Don't look at them." When she stepped into the ballroom, nobody noticed her at first. Why would they? She was just another member of the service staff, someone who existed to make their evening more comfortable. The grand piano sat on a small raised platform at the far end of the room, spotlit and waiting. As Lucia made her way through the crowd, she overheard snippets of conversation. The donation goal is 2 million this year. Did you see what she was wearing? In this economy? The market is going to correct itself by summer, mark my words. The event coordinator, a tall woman with a severe haircut and a clipboard, intercepted Lucia before she reached the piano. Who are you? She demanded. I'm the replacement pianist, Lucia replied, trying to sound confident. The woman looked her up and down, frowning at Lucia's waitress uniform. We were told there wasn't anyone available. Last-minute arrangement, Lucia said, her mouth dry. Mr. Chen asked me to fill in temporarily. The coordinator's lips thinned into a disapproving line. Well, I suppose some background music is better than nothing. Just keep it appropriate, classical pieces only, nothing experimental. Lucia nodded and continued toward the piano, feeling the weight of the woman's doubt pressing on her shoulders. As she approached the instrument, she felt a flutter of recognition. This wasn't just any piano, but a Steinway concert grand, probably worth more than she'd make in 5 years. She sat down carefully, adjusting the bench. The keys gleamed under the soft spotlight, ivory and ebony waiting for her touch. Lucia closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. When she opened them, she noticed a few curious glances from nearby guests, their expressions ranging from mild interest to outright skepticism. A tall man in an expensive suit leaned over to his companion and stage whispered, "Looks like they pulled someone from the kitchen to entertain us." His companion laughed a little too loudly. Lucia felt heat rise in her cheeks. For a moment, she considered walking away. Who was she to think she could play for people like this? But then she remembered her mother's words again. The great equalizer. She placed her fingers on the keys. The first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune floated into the air, tentative at first, then gaining confidence. Lucia had played this piece 100 times, in her tiny apartment, in practice rooms at school, in her dreams. The familiar melody wrapped around her like an old friend, calming her nerves. As she played, the room slowly began to change. Conversations quieted. People turned to look. A waiter paused mid-step, tray balanced carefully, listening. Lucia didn't notice. She had fallen into that rare space where nothing existed except the music. Not the crowd of wealthy strangers, not her stained uniform, not even her own doubts. Her fingers moved with muscle memory, finding the right keys without conscious thought. The piece built to its gentle climax, her hands dancing across the keyboard with growing assurance. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of silence. Lucia blinked, coming back to herself, suddenly aware of the room again. To her surprise, a small crowd had gathered around the piano. Their faces showed something she hadn't expected. Genuine appreciation. An older woman in a midnight blue gown stepped forward. "That was lovely, dear," she said. "Do you know any Chopin?" Lucia nodded, unable to speak. Chopin had been her mother's favorite. As she began the nocturne, more people drifted toward the piano. The event coordinator watched from a distance, her clipboard lowered, expression unreadable. Mr. Chen stood by the door, a small, satisfied smile on his face. By the third piece, Lucia had forgotten to be nervous. The music flowed through her, like water, each note clear and purposeful. She played pieces she'd practiced hundreds of times in the privacy of her apartment, never imagining an audience like this one. Yet here they were, the city's wealthiest and most influential citizens falling silent to listen to a waitress play. A young girl, perhaps 10 years old, approached the piano during a brief pause between pieces. She wore a party dress that probably cost more than Lucia's monthly rent. "How did you learn to play like that?" the girl asked, eyes wide with genuine curiosity. Lucia smiled. "My mother believed I could, so I did," she answered simply. Then she began to play again. This time a piece she'd composed herself during late nights when sleep wouldn't come. As her fingers found their way through the melody she'd created, Lucia realized something had shifted inside her. The harsh words of that long-ago instructor seemed suddenly less important than the music she was making now, in this moment. She didn't notice the event director whispering urgently into her phone, or the distinguished older man in the corner making notes in a small book. She didn't see Mr. Chen beaming with pride, or the wealthy couple exchanging meaningful glances. Lucia only knew that for the first time in years, she was playing without fear. And somehow, against all odds, the chosen elite of the city were silent, listening to a waitress with stained clothes and a second-hand dream that refused to die. The last notes of Lucia's self-composed piece hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered. She opened her eyes, not realizing she had closed them while playing. For a heartbeat, the grand ballroom remained completely silent. Then, like a wave breaking against shore, applause erupted around her. Lucia blinked, momentarily stunned. These were not the polite, obligatory claps of people simply acknowledging background music. This was genuine appreciation, enthusiastic and unexpected. Some guests were even standing. "Bravo!" called out a silver-haired man near the front. "Magnificent!" Heat rushed to Lucia's cheeks. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially not from people who normally looked through her as if she were invisible. Just hours earlier, she had served appetizers to some of these same guests, and not one had made eye contact with her. The event coordinator, who had regarded Lucia with such skepticism earlier, now approached the piano with an entirely different expression, something between shock and calculation. "That was unexpected," she said, her voice low enough that only Lucia could hear. "Would you be willing to continue for the rest of the evening? The regular program doesn't begin for another hour." Lucia glanced at her watch. Her exam tomorrow, the milk she needed to buy, her aching feet. "I really should get home," she began. "We'll pay you, of course," the coordinator added quickly. "The same rate we would have paid our scheduled pianist." The amount she named made Lucia's eyes widen. It was more than she made in 3 shifts at the restaurant. Before she could respond, Mr. Chen appeared at her side, beaming with unmistakable pride. "I told you she was good," he said to the coordinator. "Lucia has been hiding her talent from us for too long." A small crowd was gathering around the piano now. Among them was a tall, elegant woman in her 60s, dressed in a simple but clearly expensive black dress, her silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. "Young lady," she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from a lifetime of being listened to. "Your technique is remarkable. Who did you study with?" "Mrs. Abernathy at the community college," Lucia answered honestly. "And before that, just local teachers from my neighborhood." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "No conservatory training?" Lucia shook her head, feeling suddenly self-conscious about her lack of formal education. "No, ma'am." "Fascinating," the woman murmured, studying Lucia with increased interest. "Would you play something else? Perhaps Beethoven?" Lucia hesitated only briefly before turning back to the keys. She chose Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the first movement with its gentle rolling arpeggios that had always spoken to her of quiet yearning. As she played, she forgot again about the watching eyes, the expensive clothes, the judgment. There was only the music flowing from her fingers as naturally as breathing. When she finished, the silver-haired woman nodded, as if confirming something to herself. She reached into her clutch and withdrew a business card, placing it deliberately on top of the piano. "I'm Eleanor Phillips, director of the City Symphony. Call my office tomorrow. I'd like to discuss something with you." Lucia stared at the card in disbelief. The City Symphony was world-renowned. She had never been able to afford tickets to their performances, but she'd stood outside the concert hall sometimes just to hear muffled strains of music when the doors opened. I thank you," she managed, carefully taking the card and slipping it into her pocket. Eleanor Phillips gave her a small, enigmatic smile before rejoining the crowd. As she walked away, Lucia overheard her say to a companion, "Remarkable what talent one finds in unexpected places." The next hour passed in a blur. Lucia played piece after piece, some classical, some modern, even a few movie themes that younger guests requested. Each time she finished, the applause grew warmer. People were taking videos on their phones. Someone handed her a glass of water. Another guest brought her a plate of food from the buffet. insisting she must be hungry. Between pieces, guests approached to introduce themselves. A music teacher from a private school asked where she'd learned to play with such emotion. A retired pianist complimented her interpretation of Chopin. A young mother wanted to know if Lucia gave lessons. It was overwhelming. Just hours ago, these same people would have brushed past her without a second glance. Now they were treating her like she belonged among them. During a brief break, Mr. Chen brought her a cup of tea. "You've been hiding quite a gift," he said, quietly. "Why didn't you ever mention you could play like this?" Lucia wrapped her fingers around the warm cup. "It never seemed relevant to serving tables," she answered with a small smile. Then, more seriously, "I gave up on music as a career a long time ago. It just hurt too much to talk about." Mr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the dreams we set aside find their way back to us when we least expect it." As the evening progressed, Lucia noticed a man watching her from the edge of the crowd. Unlike the others in their formal attire, he wore a casual blazer over a t-shirt, the unofficial uniform of the tech industry. His attention was different, more focused, as if he were solving a puzzle. He didn't approach the piano, just observed, occasionally typing something on his phone. Around 9 o'clock, the event coordinator announced that the formal program was about to begin. The mayor would speak, followed by a video presentation about the Children's Hospital and finally the donation pledges. "Let's give one more round of applause for our unexpected musical guest, Lucia," the coordinator said into the microphone. The crowd responded enthusiastically. Several people called out for one more song. Lucia looked questioningly at the coordinator, who nodded her permission. For her final piece, Lucia chose something deeply personal, a lullaby her mother used to sing, which Lucia had adapted for piano during her first year of music theory. It was simple compared to the classical pieces she'd been playing, but it carried her heart in every note. As she played, she thought of her mother, who had cleaned houses and worked extra shifts to pay for those early piano lessons. Who had believed in Lucia's talent even when Lucia herself had lost faith? Who would have been so proud to see her daughter playing on a grand piano for the city's elite? When the last note faded, Lucia felt a tear slide down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. But when she looked up, she saw several people in the audience dabbing at their eyes as well. The applause this time was different, less enthusiastic clapping and more heartfelt appreciation. Lucia stood and gave a small, awkward bow before stepping away from the piano. As the crowd's attention shifted to the mayor approaching the podium, Lucia slipped toward the back of the room. She needed a moment to collect herself, to process what had just happened. The weight of Eleanor Phillips's business card seemed to burn in her pocket. That was quite a performance. The voice came from beside her. It was the casual blazer man, who had been watching her all evening. "Thank you," Lucia replied cautiously. "I'm David," he said, offering his hand. "I run a music education nonprofit. We bring instruments and lessons to schools that have lost their arts funding." Lucia shook his hand. "That sounds wonderful." "It is," David agreed. "But we're always short on teachers who can really connect with the kids. People who understand that music isn't just about technique. It's about emotion and expression." He paused. "People like you." Lucia wasn't sure how to respond. This evening had already been surreal enough. "I heard you mention to someone that you're studying music education," David continued. "We offer paid teaching positions with flexible hours. Students like you are exactly who we're looking for." He handed her a card similar to the one Eleanor Phillips had given her. 2 opportunities in one night, it didn't seem possible. "Think about it," David said. "No pressure. But that last piece you played, that's the kind of music that changes lives." As David walked away, Lucia felt a tap on her shoulder. It was Ray, her co-worker, who had left early for his child's school play. "I came back to help clean up after my kid's show," he explained. "Chen told me what happened." He shook his head in amazement. "The quiet waitress who always covers my shifts is secretly a piano prodigy. Who would have thought?" Lucia laughed. "Hardly a prodigy, just someone who loves music." Well, the internet seems to disagree, Ray said, holding up his phone. You're trending locally. Someone posted a video of you playing and it's getting shared like crazy. Lucia felt a rush of panic. What? No, that can't be right. But there, it was, a video of her playing the Beethoven piece already with thousands of views and comments pouring in. The caption read, "Waitress steps up to piano at charity gala, leaves everyone speechless." Looks like your life just changed, Ray said, squeezing her shoulder gently. As the mayor droned on about community support and generosity at the podium, Lucia stood in the back of the ballroom, caught between her old life and what suddenly seemed possible. The business cards in her pocket, the viral video, the music that had never really left her, even when she'd tried to set it aside. For the first time in years, Lucia allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where her passion and her profession might be the same thing, one where she wouldn't have to choose between paying rent and pursuing her dreams. It terrified her and thrilled her, both at once. Lucia barely slept that night. Her tiny apartment, usually a sanctuary after long shifts, felt different somehow, as if the walls had witnessed her transformation and were holding their breath to see what would happen next. She sat cross-legged on her bed at 3 in the morning, staring at the 2 business cards she'd received. Eleanor Phillips, director of the City Symphony. David Mercer, founder of Music for Everyone. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. The video of her playing had been shared thousands of times overnight. Friends she hadn't spoken to in years were messaging her, former classmates, even her high school music teacher. "I knew you had something special," Mrs. Rodriguez had written. "I always wondered why you stopped." Lucia's roommate Tina sat beside her, scrolling through comments on the video. "Listen to this one," Tina said, her voice groggy but excited. "This gave me chills. Who is she? Does she have an album?" "They're probably just being nice," Lucia murmured, though part of her didn't believe that. "Nice? Lucia, people don't get 500,000 views for nice. They're responding to something real." Tina handed the phone back to her. "You have to call those people. The symphony lady and the nonprofit guy." Lucia twisted the edge of her blanket between her fingers. "What if last night was a fluke? What if I go in there and they realize I'm just ordinary?" Tina sighed. "Do I need to play the video for you? Again? That wasn't ordinary. That was something else entirely." Before Lucia could respond, her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but Tina gave her a look that said she'd better. "Hello?" Lucia's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Is this Lucia Reyes?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "Yes, this is she." "This is Pamela Jenkins, assistant to Eleanor Phillips at the City Symphony. Ms. Phillips asked me to follow up with you regarding a meeting. Would you be available to come in this afternoon?" Lucia's heart jumped to her throat. "This afternoon? I have class until 2, and then a shift at the restaurant starting at 4. There was a pause on the other end. "Ms. Phillips is quite eager to speak with you. Would 2:30 work? Our offices are downtown, about 15 minutes from the community college." Lucia calculated quickly. If she skipped lunch and ran straight from class, she could make it to the symphony offices and still get to the restaurant only a little late. Mr. Chen would understand. After last night, he'd probably give her the whole day off if she asked. 2:30 works, she said, trying to sound calm. "Excellent. 15th floor of the Walker Building. Ask for me at reception." After hanging up, Lucia looked at Tina with wide eyes. "That was the symphony. They want to meet this afternoon." Tina bounced up and down on the bed. "See? I told you. What are you going to wear?" Reality crashed down on Lucia like a cold wave. "I don't have anything suitable for meeting the director of the City Symphony. Everything I own is either for waiting tables or going to classes." Tina was already on her feet, heading for her own closet. "You can borrow my interview outfit, the navy blue one with the subtle pinstripes. It'll be a little loose on you, but we can make it work with a belt. I can't just walk in there looking like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's clothes," Lucia protested. Tina emerged with the outfit on a hanger. "You can and you will. This is your shot, Lucia. Your actual shot at something bigger. Don't you dare sabotage it by worrying about clothes. An hour later, Lucia finally dozed off, but her dreams were filled with pianos that kept getting larger and audiences that never stopped growing. When her alarm went off at 7, she felt like she'd barely closed her eyes. Her morning class passed in a blur. Usually, Lucia was an attentive student, taking detailed notes and asking questions. Today, she couldn't focus. Her music theory professor kept giving her concerned glances but didn't call on her. After class, Professor Williams caught her at the door. "I saw the video," he said quietly. Lucia froze. "You did?" He nodded, a gentle smile spreading across his weathered face. "A former student sent it to me. Said I should see what one of my current students was doing in her spare time." He paused. "You never mentioned you could play like that." Lucia looked down at her worn sneakers. "I didn't think it was relevant to theory class." "Not relevant?" Professor Williams chuckled. "Lucia, theory without performance is just rules on paper. What you did last night, that's music. That's why all these rules exist in the first place." A lump formed in Lucia's throat. "I have a meeting with Eleanor Phillips today," she admitted. "From the City Symphony." Professor Williams' eyebrows shot up. "Eleanor Phillips? Well, well." He seemed genuinely impressed. "She doesn't waste her time on just anyone. Whatever she offers you, listen carefully. Eleanor has an eye for talent." Those words followed Lucia as she rushed across town to the Walker Building. Tina's navy blue outfit felt stiff and unfamiliar, and she'd borrowed a pair of low heels that pinched her toes. Her usual canvas backpack seemed out of place with the more formal clothes, but she hadn't had time to find an alternative. The Walker Building lobby was all marble and glass, intimidating in its elegance. Lucia gave her name to the security guard, who checked a list before directing her to a specific elevator. 15th floor, he confirmed. "They're expecting you." The elevator rose smoothly, carrying Lucia away from the world she knew. Community. College, double shifts, discount groceries, toward something unknown. When the doors opened, she stepped into a softly lit reception area where a wall of glass revealed a stunning view of the city. "Lucia Reyes?" A woman in her 40s approached, with an outstretched hand. "I'm Pamela. We spoke on the phone. Ms. Phillips is ready for you." Pamela led her down a hallway lined with framed posters of past symphony seasons. Lucia recognized some of the most famous classical musicians in the world on those posters. People who had trained their entire lives, who had attended Juilliard and Curtis and other prestigious conservatories. People nothing like her. Eleanor Phillips's office was surprisingly modest, functional but not flashy. The woman herself sat behind a simple desk, reviewing what looked like a musical score. She looked up when Lucia entered, those same piercing eyes from last night now studying her in daylight. "Ah, the waitress with the hidden talent," Eleanor said, standing to greet her. "Please, sit down." Lucia perched on the edge of a chair, her borrowed outfit suddenly feeling like the costume it was. "Thank you for inviting me, Miss Phillips." "Eleanor, please." She returned to her own seat. "I'll get straight to the point. I've been directing this symphony for 23 years. In that time, I've heard thousands of pianists, professionally, trained, conservatory graduates, child prodigies, the works." She leaned forward slightly. "What you did last night was something different." Lucia swallowed hard. "Different good or different bad?" The corner of Eleanor's mouth twitched upward. "Would I have asked you here if it was bad? No, what made your playing stand out was its authenticity. Technical skill can be taught, but emotional connection? That's much rarer." She pushed a folder across the desk. Lucia opened it to find sheet music, complex compositions she recognized, as pieces performed by featured soloists with orchestras. "Our current season includes a community spotlight series," Eleanor continued. "Local talents performing with our orchestra. We had a cancellation for next month's concert. I'd like you to consider filling that spot." Lucia's breath caught. "Performing? With the City Symphony? I don't even have a proper repertoire prepared." That's what rehearsals are for, Eleanor replied matter-of-factly. You'd have 4 weeks to prepare. We'd provide a coach to work with you. She tapped the folder. Choose one of these pieces. They're all within your technical ability based on what I heard last night. The room seemed to tilt slightly. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. People who worked double shifts and counted pennies. For textbooks. Why me? The question slipped out before Lucia could stop it. Eleanor sat back, studying her. Because you played like someone who has something to say. Most technically proficient pianists are just reciting, playing the notes, perfectly but without personal voice. You played like each note mattered to you personally. She reached for her phone and turned it toward Lucia. The video from last night was playing, but with the sound off. Look at the audience, not yourself, Eleanor instructed. Lucia watched as the camera panned across faces in the crowd. What she saw surprised her. These wealthy, powerful people weren't just being politely attentive, they were genuinely moved. An elderly man wiped a tear. A young woman stood perfectly still, transfixed. Even the event coordinator had stopped, checking her clipboard. That's why, Eleanor said simply, turning the phone off. That's the reaction every artist hopes for, but few achieve. Lucia stared at the folder in her hands, possibility and terror warring within her. Can I have a day to think about it? Of course, but I should mention, this is a paid opportunity, not a fortune, but enough to make it worth your while. On her way out, still dazed from the meeting, Lucia nearly collided with a man entering the reception area. It was David from the nonprofit. Lucia? He seemed as surprised as she was. I didn't expect to see you here. I had a meeting with Eleanor Phillips, she explained, feeling strangely guilty, as if she'd been caught cheating on a test. David's eyebrows rose. Eleanor works fast. I only sent her the video this morning. You sent it to her? He nodded. After meeting you last night, I thought you two should connect. I didn't realize she'd already given you her card. Lucia didn't know whether to thank him or not. Everything was happening so quickly. I left you a voicemail this morning, David continued. About coming to see our program in action. We've got a class this evening at Washington Elementary if you're interested. Lucia glanced at her watch. She was already going to be late for her shift. One more detour would mean missing it entirely. Mr. Chen would understand, but could she afford to lose those hours? The rent was due next week. Then again, when would she get another chance like this? I'd love to see it, she heard herself say. But I'll need to make a call first. As she rode the elevator back down to street level, Lucia felt as if she were standing at a crossroads. Behind her lay the safe, familiar path she'd been following for years. Ahead stretched something new and frightening and possibly wonderful. She took out her phone and called the restaurant. Washington Elementary School sat in a neighborhood Lucia had never visited before, though it was only 20 minutes from her apartment. The buildings here were worn, with security bars on windows and faded storefronts advertising check-cashing services and discount groceries. Children played in a small park with patchy grass and a single basketball hoop missing its net. Mr. Chen had been surprisingly understanding when Lucia called to say she couldn't make her shift. Take the week, he'd insisted. This is more important. The restaurant will still be here if things don't work out. His words had been meant as reassurance, but they left Lucia with a knot in her stomach. If things don't work out, of course they might not. This could all fade as quickly as it had appeared, a strange dream that lasted just long enough to make her question the path she'd settled for. David was waiting at the school entrance, talking with a security guard who nodded at Lucia as she approached. Right on time, David said, looking genuinely pleased to see her. We're just about to start. The kids have been extra excited today because I told them we have a special guest. Lucia followed him through dingy hallways with scuffed floors but colorful student artwork brightening the walls. The sound of children's voices grew louder as they approached what turned out to be the cafeteria. Tables had been pushed aside to make room for about 20 kids sitting in a semicircle. In the center were various instruments, some recorders, a few small keyboards, a couple of guitars, and several percussion instruments. We bring everything with us, David explained quietly. The school lost its music program 3 years ago, due to budget cuts. A young woman with purple-streaked hair was leading the children in a simple rhythm game, clapping out patterns for them to repeat. She looked up when David and Lucia entered, giving them a quick wave without interrupting the activity. "That's Zoe, one of our best teachers," David said. "She studied percussion at the conservatory but prefers teaching to performing." Lucia watched as the children, ranging from about 8 to 12 years old, focused intently on following Zoe's increasingly complex rhythms. They weren't all successful. Some got lost or clapped at the wrong time. But what struck Lucia was how they laughed at their mistakes instead of getting frustrated. "We don't focus on perfection here," David said, seeming to read her thoughts. "It's about connection to music, not technical mastery, especially at the beginning." After the warm-up, Zoe divided the children into groups, each working on different aspects of a simple song. David guided Lucia around the room, introducing her to other instructors helping with each group. Most were music students or recent graduates working part-time for the nonprofit. "We pay them a decent hourly rate," David explained. "Not what they'd make giving private lessons to wealthy kids, but enough to make it worthwhile. And the experience is invaluable." A small boy with glasses too big for his face was struggling with a keyboard part. His instructor was patient, demonstrating again and again, but the boy's small fingers kept missing the right keys. Frustration began to show on his face. Before she realized what she was doing, Lucia found herself kneeling beside him. "May I?" she asked the instructor, who nodded and moved aside. "Hey there," Lucia said to the boy. "I'm Lucia. What's your name?" "Anthony," he replied quietly, eyes downcast. "I can't get it right." "That's okay. I mess up all the time too." She positioned her hands beside his on the keyboard. "Instead of thinking about which key to press, try thinking about the sound you want to make, like telling a story with your fingers." Anthony looked skeptical, but Lucia continued. "Close your eyes. Now imagine you're walking through a forest. It's peaceful and quiet. How would that sound?" Hesitantly, Anthony pressed a few keys, creating a simple, gentle melody. It wasn't the piece he'd been trying to learn, but it was musical. "That's beautiful," Lucia encouraged. "Now imagine you see something exciting, like a colorful bird." "How would that sound?" Anthony's fingers moved more quickly, hitting higher notes in a playful pattern. A small smile appeared on his face. "You're telling a story with music," Lucia said. "That's what it's all about." When she looked up, she found David watching her, a knowing expression on his face. Around the room, other instructors had paused, their lessons, observing the interaction. "You're a natural teacher," David said later as they watched the children perform their completed song for each other. It was far from perfect, timing issues, wrong notes, missed entrances, but the pride on their faces was unmistakable. "I never thought about teaching like this," Lucia admitted. "In college, they focus so much on methods and curriculum. This feels different." "That's because these kids aren't being graded or judged. They're just experiencing the joy of creating something together." David handed her a folder similar to the one Eleanor Phillips had given her earlier. "Here's information about our program, schedules, compensation, training. We could start you with 1 class per week. See how it fits with your other commitments." Other commitments. The symphony opportunity. Her classes. The restaurant. Lucia's head was spinning with possibilities that hadn't existed 2 days ago. "I don't know what to say," she began. "Don't say anything yet," David suggested. "Think it over. Talk to Eleanor too. This isn't an either-or situation, you know. Many musicians balance performance and teaching." After the class ended, Lucia helped pack up instruments. Several children came to thank her, including Anthony, who proudly showed her a notebook where he'd written down his forest song, using the simple notation they'd learned. "Will you be here next week?" he asked, eyes hopeful behind those 2 big glasses. "I'm not sure yet," Lucia answered honestly, "but I'd like to be." On the bus ride home, Lucia's phone rang. It was Tina. "Where have you been?" her roommate demanded. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Sorry, I had my phone off. I was visiting a music program for kids after my meeting with the symphony. Just saying those words out loud felt surreal. Well, you need to get home and check your email, like now. Why? What's happened? Remember that record producer who was at the gala? Apparently, he's been trying to track you down. The video hit 1 million views, Lucia. 1 million. He wants to talk to you about recording something. Lucia nearly dropped her phone. That's not possible. Check your email, Tina insisted. And hurry home. We need to figure out what you're going to wear for TV. TV? What are you talking about? Channel 8 called the restaurant trying to find you. They want you for their morning show tomorrow. Human interest story or whatever. Mr. Chen gave them my number. The bus lurched to a stop and Lucia realized she'd nearly missed her transfer. She stumbled off, mind reeling. Tina, this is crazy. I'm not doing TV. I'm not recording anything. I need a minute to think. A minute? Lucia, this is happening whether you're ready or not. The universe is practically screaming at you to take this chance. Maybe Tina was right, but it all felt so overwhelming. 48 hours ago, she'd been a waitress who played piano in private. Now, strangers were watching her online, television, shows were calling, and she had opportunities that seemed to multiply by the hour. When she finally reached her apartment building, Lucia sat down on the front steps, needing a moment before facing Tina's excitement. She pulled out the 2 folders she'd received today, one from the symphony, one from the nonprofit. Such different paths, both suddenly within reach. Her phone buzzed with yet another notification, a text from Professor Williams. My colleague at Westbrook College saw your video. They have a scholarship opening in their music department. Full ride. Call me. Lucia closed her eyes, feeling simultaneously blessed and terrified. What if she made the wrong choice? What if she couldn't live up to everyone's sudden expectations? What if this all disappeared as quickly as it had come? An old memory surfaced. Her mother sitting beside her at their neighbor's piano, gently guiding her small hands over the keys. Music is a gift, her mother had said. When someone offers you a gift, the only proper response is gratitude. Lucia took a deep breath, looking up at the evening sky. Thank you, she whispered to her mother, to the universe, to whatever twist of fate had led her to that piano at the gala. Then she stood, straightened her shoulders and headed inside to face whatever came next. The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time in years, it was full of possibilities. And that, she realized, was a kind of music too. The sound of a life opening up to new melodies after playing the same notes for far too long. 6 months had passed since the night Lucia stepped up to the piano at the Bellevue Hotel. 6 months that had transformed her life in ways she still struggled to fully comprehend. The morning sun streamed through the windows of her new apartment. Nothing fancy, but a definite upgrade from the cramped place she'd shared with Tina. A small upright piano, purchased second-hand but carefully restored, sat against one wall. Sheet music and textbooks were stacked neatly on a desk beside it. Lucia sipped her coffee, watching the city wake up from her third-floor view. In an hour, she'd head to Washington Elementary for her twice-weekly teaching session with the Music for Everyone program. Later, she had a rehearsal with the symphony for their upcoming spring concert series. Between those commitments, she'd squeeze in a few hours of classes at Westbrook College, where she'd transferred on full scholarship to complete her music education degree. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. Don't forget, board meeting tonight. They want to discuss expanding the program to 2 more schools. Lucia smiled. After 3 months of volunteer teaching, she'd been asked to join the nonprofit's board of directors. Her perspective as both a teacher and a performer had proven valuable as they worked to secure additional funding and refine their curriculum. Another text arrived, this one from Mr. Chen. TV crew coming to film promo for employee showcase tonight. Still coming? That made Lucia's smile widen. Perhaps the most unexpected outcome of her viral moment had been the changes at the Bellevue Hotel. Inspired by the public response to Lucia's performance, Mr. Chen had convinced hotel management to create a monthly showcase for employee talents. What began as a small event in the restaurant had grown into a popular evening that drew locals and hotel guests alike. The waiting staff, kitchen workers, housekeeping personnel, and maintenance crew took turns sharing their hidden talents. Everything from classical piano to spoken word poetry to traditional dance. The showcase had not only boosted employee morale but had become a marketing point for the hotel. "Where extraordinary talent serves you" was their new slogan, with Lucia's story featured prominently in their promotional materials. Lucia still worked at the restaurant one night a week. Not because she needed the money anymore. Between her, teaching, occasional performances, and the modest advance from the EP she'd recorded with a local producer, but because it kept her grounded. It reminded her where this journey had begun, and connected her to the friends who had supported her before she became the piano waitress, as the local media had dubbed her. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Eleanor Phillips. "Good morning," Lucia answered, still slightly awed that the symphony director now called her directly. "Lucia, I've just had an interesting conversation with the board," Eleanor said, skipping pleasantries as usual. "They're discussing next season's Community Spotlight series." "Already? But we haven't even finished this season." "Planning ahead is what we do," Eleanor replied. "Here's the thing. Your performance last month drew our highest attendance in years. The audience survey results were off the charts." Lucia felt a flutter of pride. Her first performance with the symphony had been terrifying, but the months of preparation with her assigned coach had paid off. She'd played Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, a piece that had once seemed impossibly challenging, but had become a friend through hundreds of hours of practice. "The board wants to expand the community spotlight," Eleanor continued. "Instead of one-off performances, they're proposing a resident artist position, 6 performances throughout the season, educational outreach, master classes for young musicians. A real commitment." Lucia's breath caught. "And you're telling me this because they want you, obviously. Your story resonates with people, Lucia. You become a symbol of hidden talent, of second chances, of the power of music to transform lives." Eleanor paused. "And you play beautifully, which doesn't hurt." The offer was extraordinary, the kind of opportunity most classically trained pianists would kill for, handed to a former waitress who had given up on her musical dreams years ago. "I'd need to think about it," Lucia said carefully. "My schedule is already pretty full with teaching and school." "Of course. Take your time." A hint of amusement crept into Eleanor's voice. "Though not too much time. The board meets again next week." After hanging up, Lucia stood by the window watching a group of school children cross the street below, their backpacks bouncing as they walked. She thought of Anthony and the other kids at Washington Elementary, how their faces lit up when they created music together. She thought of the elderly residents at the community center where she'd started volunteering, playing for them on Sunday afternoons. She thought of the hotel employees who had found the courage to share their own talents because of her example. Music had always been her private joy, her personal escape. Now it had become something communal, something she shared. That was the most unexpected gift of all. Her doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Tina carrying 2 garment bags. "Okay, so I've got 2 options for tonight's TV thing," her friend announced, barging in without waiting for an invitation. "The blue dress is more professional, but the red one will pop on camera." Lucia laughed. "I told you I'm not even sure. I'm going to be on camera, I'm just attending to support everyone else." Tina rolled her eyes. "Right. Like they're not going to want an interview with the woman who started it all." She hung the garment bags on the back of a chair. "You know, sometimes I still can't believe all this happened because you played a piano when some rich dude's entertainment canceled." "I think about that a lot," Lucia admitted. "How different my life would be if I'd said no that night. If I'd been too afraid to try." "But you weren't," Tina said simply. "That's the thing about you, Lucia. When it really matters, you find your courage." Later that afternoon, Lucia sat at a keyboard in the Washington Elementary cafeteria. watching Anthony lead a group of younger children in a song he'd composed himself. His confidence had blossomed over the past months, his initial hesitation replaced by an enthusiasm that inspired the other kids. "Miss Lucia, did you see how Miguel hit all the right notes?" Anthony said proudly, gesturing to a small boy who beamed at the recognition. "I helped him practice during lunch." "I did see that," Lucia confirmed. "You're becoming quite the teacher, Anthony." The boy adjusted his glasses, which still seemed too big for his face. "I want to be like you when I grow up, teaching music, and playing in concerts and everything." A lump formed in Lucia's throat. "You'll be even better than me," she told him, "because you're starting your journey earlier than I did." After class, David walked her to the bus stop. "The kids worship you, you know," he said, "especially since they saw you on TV." Lucia groaned. "That morning show interview was so awkward. I had no idea what to say." "You were genuine," David countered. "That's why people connect with your story. You're not some polished celebrity. You're a real person who took a chance and found your path." They paused at the corner where their routes diverged. David heading to the nonprofit's office, Lucia to her rehearsal at the symphony hall. "By the way," David said, "I heard from Eleanor about the resident artist offer." Lucia raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast." He shrugged. "Small music world. It's an amazing opportunity, Lucia." "It is," she agreed. "But I don't want to give up teaching at Washington Elementary. Those kids count on me now." David smiled. "I figured you'd say that, which is why I've already talked to Eleanor about coordinating schedules. The symphony's educational outreach could partner with our program. Imagine bringing those kids to the symphony hall, letting them see where music can take them." Lucia's mind filled with the image, Anthony and the others sitting in those plush seats experiencing the full power of an orchestra for the first time. Their eyes wide with wonder, their horizons expanding beyond their neighborhood. "You really think we could make that work?" she asked. "I know we can," David replied confidently. "This is just the beginning, Lucia." That evening, the employee showcase at the Bellevue Hotel was packed. Local television crews set up cameras near the small stage where the baby grand piano, the same one Lucia had played that fateful night, gleamed under the lights. Backstage, a nervous housekeeper practiced her violin piece. A bartender rehearsed a poem he'd written. A maintenance worker fine-tuned his guitar. Lucia moved among them, offering encouragement and tips for managing nerves, sharing the techniques her symphony coach had taught her. Mr. Chen approached, clipboard in hand. "Quite a difference from our first showcase," he observed. "Remember when we could barely fill half the restaurant?" Lucia nodded. "Now you need a reservation 2 weeks in advance. The hotel's booking rate is up 15% since we started this," Mr. Chen added. "Turns out, people love knowing that the person making their bed or serving their dinner might be a hidden virtuoso." When it was time for the show to begin, Lucia took her usual seat in the audience. She wasn't performing tonight. This event wasn't about her anymore. It had become something bigger, a celebration of all the unrecognized talent that existed in everyday places.